Well, Congressman, you're both opposed to H.R. 2997 or ATC privatization. Tell us why.
Well, it's bad for national security, number one. I think there's three things that government does have a role in: our national defense, our national intelligence, and our national aerospace. Conservatives flock to smaller government privatization like bees to honey. But unfortunately, this particular bill is like dogs to antifreeze. We'll lap it up and there will be consequences. So we absolutely oppose it. I oppose it largely for national security reasons, although there are a number of general aviation and other issues that it will deeply affect.
Well, tell me more about the national security issue. How will it affect national security?
Every day in the skies, there's things that go on that even the airlines are not aware of in our aerospace. At altitudes well beyond even a 35,000-foot aircraft. And the interoperability, the prioritization of military in our airspace, these are things that we just never want to relinquish. All the assurances in the world are not guarantees of understanding and immediacy of action. As an example, on the very first day in his new position as the air traffic operations manager of all of air operations, Ben Sliney came to work on September 11th, 2001, looking forward to his first day at work. Within a couple hours, he grounded 4,000 aircraft and essentially shut down all of U.S. airspace. That was a gutsy call, and it was the right call. Okay, imagine a scenario where now it's, whose call is it? Well, we don't call the board members. We got a 13-member board. Well, what is it? I don't know. Do you think we're under attack? I don't know. Do we call the president? I don't know. What do we do? Should we ground planes? Well, I don't know. I mean, you can see where this is going. Even if they could rapidly do that, why would we relinquish the national security of our airspace to a private corporation? We just shouldn't do it.
Yes, but the counter argument is that we're using an antiquated system. We're using old systems. What good is that to the military anyhow?
Well, let's take that argument then to the United States military. If the inability to have modernized equipment delivered on time, or the inability to have manned systems or manned squads or manned crews at full level and all of that were a disqualification, then our United States military could do nothing. But the fact of the matter is 88,000 flights a day are managed. 88,000. So you take Europe with their 35,000, and then you take Canada, which is less than most states or individual state in the United States. It doesn't even compare to what our air traffic controllers do, and they've done it safely.
Have you had conversations with the military about this?
Absolutely have. And I was a warrior in uniform for over 2 decades. I wasn't a pilot in uniform, but I do understand the importance of our national security. Most people don't realize that our air traffic controllers take an oath of office. And when I first brought this up to those that were championing the bill, they called me out on it. They said, well, air traffic controllers don't take oaths of office. And I said, they most certainly do. Why? They handle classified things. At any moment, someone could walk into a control tower and lay down some flight plans and say, you will cease operations and you will file these plans. They can do that. Why? Because our controllers take oaths of office. A private corporation with no Title 31 oversight, that's the oversight that governs our ability to oversee appropriated dollars. This bill says it's a private company with absolutely no connection to government of any kind, and that it will not be under Title 31 authority. But it still demands future appropriation. And as such, a private company, there's no prohibitions on the hiring of foreign nationals. Do you want foreign nationals in your tower? Even if they took an oath of office, I mean, what's their allegiance? So there's a lot of problems with this. And it's not just contracting like we do with Department of Defense or something like that. They still fall under oversight. This private corporation does not, and it will create an awful lot of problems with our airspace.
Well, obviously the military can't be out front lobbying on this, but has the Pentagon told you they don't want it?
There's some battlefield indicators, okay? Rather than addressing the issues of spectrum, of interoperability, of decision-making and prioritization, and all of these issues that are real, rather than addressing our concerns that we've pointed out, they just dismiss them. They say, well, the Secretary of Defense is for it. No, the Secretary of Defense has stated in kind of a non-committal letter that he supports the president and he will do what's required to overcome the challenges. Well, that's what we would expect from any Secretary of Defense. He has to. But having worn the uniform myself, I can assure you there's a difference. And when you have people come in and testify, and we serve on the Armed Forces Committee and I'm on Oversight and Government Reform, when someone in uniform or in DOD walks in and they say, we support the president in this. We have some challenges that we will need to overcome and we'll get it done. Well, translated, that's someone in the military saying, Congress has pretty much messed it up again and we don't like it, but it's our job and we'll get it done. Now, if they came in and said, look, if we don't have this policy, here are the consequences. Our men and women in uniform will be suffering in readiness. They won't be able to do X, Y, or Z. We won't be able to deploy to A, B, or C. When they come in with that kind of message, then they're really committed to that policy. That's not what we're seeing. On the contrary, we're getting all kinds of information from the five-sided building, and we're getting all kinds of things that confirm, because we're just doing our homework and saying, okay, are we off? Is our data wrong? Is there something we've missed? And instead of getting, hey, I see how you got there, but you're really you're off. That's not the case. Instead, what we're getting is like, oh no, you're spot on. In fact, you need to add some of this, and they, just today, I got 2 more examples of why national security should be a concern. And this from a flag officer who was also one of the major airline pilots. He was both.
Congressman Abraham, you have some concerns about what this would do to general aviation.
Several concerns. As Congressman Russell said, just the national security alone should be enough concern that privatization doesn't pass. And again, if this were strictly a privatization bill, we may be more akin to looking at it more closely. This is a monopolization product that this bill is promoting. Again, we have got a CBO score, and whether they're mostly right or even half right, of $100 billion. That's with the B, that would add to our debt, because we are going to simply give all this time and treasure that the FAA has invested in Next Gen and just give it to this quote, unquote, private corporation. Modernization, as you alluded to, we're all for modernization. We are almost there with Next Gen. We have spent treasure on that, and 2020 is the deadline for that to come to fruition. They're going to meet that deadline. And as a pilot that flies very often in this air traffic control system, Next Gen is going to work, and it will work very quickly here. The other issue, as Congressman Russell alluded to, is the Title 31. This corporation, this board, will require a lot of extra funding, and we're talking a lot of money. And Congress is going to have no oversight over that. One, that's unconstitutional to begin with. So that's another aspect that we have to look at. The big picture, we are in the busiest and safest air traffic control system in the world. Why would we want to even risk giving that up to some unknown that has no track record, that is literally stacked in favor of the big iron? No, we don't need to go there. The other issue that I'm concerned about, I'm from Louisiana in a very rural community. We have small airports, we have regional airports, and if this bill was to pass, it would allow the big carriers to go to user fees instead of fuel tax. Where are most of the users that use big iron? East Coast and West Coast. What about all of us in the middle, the flyover states literally? Where would we end up with this bill? I can tell you where we'll end up. We end up on the short end of that stick. And even though the authors of this bill say, well, there's some provisions to prevent that, well, maybe for a year or two, but then all hands off. I worry that these airports that depend on federal dollars will be left out of the mix. And people don't understand, if my constituent has to drive to a large metropolitan area to catch a flight, they usually have to go and spend an overnight hotel because they've got to catch a 6 a.m. flight in the morning. They have to park their car for a week at a time. That's $100 plus to get out of that parking lot. People don't even put that into the equation. So again, those are a few reasons that this bill is bad in just about every way, but there are others too.
Congressman, did I hear you suggest that this monopolized system would cost significantly more than the current system?
That's exactly what I mean. Yes. And another issue, the authors and those that support this bill, they say, well, it works in Canada. I've flown in the Canadian airspace pretty much. And no, it doesn't work like it works in America. I've lost radar coverage, I've lost comms. And again, this is a country that is vast and wide, just like the United States, that should be able to not lose me as a pilot in the air as far as radar or comms. In the European model that they want to compare it to, as Congressman Russell will tell you, 80% of that airspace is owned by the military. Yeah. The GA has a very small slice of that.
Those that even can fly.
Exactly. And do we want to get to that point where we have to just beg and plead just to be able to take an airplane up for a flight to see a sunset? No. This is America. We want to continue.
And on the Canada piece, one of the things, they're always comparing to Canada. Canada has 1,900 air traffic controllers. Okay, the Department of Defense alone has over 8,000. So this isn't even a comparison. It's not comparing an apple to an orange. It's comparing an apple to a horseshoe. I mean, these are not even comparisons that we want. So to say we need to adopt a Canadian system, and then Canada doesn't have, I mean, I love the Canadians. I've been all through Canada, driven the Alcan twice, been to nearly every territory, wonderful people. That's not the point. The point is, when it comes to national security of their airspace, you know what the Canadian defense plan is for airspace? It's called the United States military. And that's not a hit on Canada, it's just reality. And so you can't be drawing these types of comparisons to something that's not really comparable. And on constitutionality that Congressman Abraham raised earlier, this is a key point because in Article 1, Section 8, it gives the power of Congress to regulate, to raise revenues, and to do these different things. Under this construct, with no Title 31 authority, you now are going to give a private corporation the ability to change regulations, to levy fees, to levy fines, to levy revenues. And for them to do that with no oversight from Congress, that's unconstitutional. And that's not just us saying or some hyperbole. This was the opinion of many scholars in the Congressional Research Service when they published a lengthy report citing case after case where they felt that this would run into severe constitutional challenge. Now, I'm not an attorney, but after reading their report, they make a very good case.
And even though NATCO may be in favor of it, the union leaders, because they were given so many concessions in this bill, I can tell you, I have talked to many, many air traffic controllers, the men and women that are actually in the control towers. I've yet to find one
me too.
That is for this bill.
And in my district, we know a little bit about air traffic control training. We have the Mike Monroney Center there. Every air traffic controller in the country is trained there. You can't find even contract controllers. They're saying, no, this gives us real concern, and they have it on many, many levels. And so when you talk about the impact on general aviation also, I mean, the reason it's efficient where, Herman can fly his Airbus down to Tempelhof Airport there in Berlin with his Yeah, he can glide in from 35,000 feet because all of that airspace doesn't belong to the people there. He didn't have to worry about Steve Russell in a Cessna 140 puttering around, getting in his way. In the United States, though, who owns our airspace? We, the people, own the airspace. The taxpayers own the American citizens own the airspace, not some private corporation. And then when it comes to security of that, like I said, national defense, national intelligence, and national aerospace, you just don't give those things up to a private entity. If we did, why don't we just contract the defense of our country? That's more efficient. No, it would be disastrous.
It's almost an article of faith on your side of the aisle that private business can do it better no matter what. So why are most of your colleagues wrong on this issue?
Well, I think one of the reasons, and I think it's unfair to say most, we've built a pretty good coalition. And the way we've done that is we've not gone around and said, hey, so-and-so's wrong and I'm right, or well, no, we just say, have you seen this? And we just open up the bill and go to the sections on Article 31 or Title 31, or we go to defense, or the fact that the president only has been relegated to wartime authority only. So if this bill were law in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan could not have shut down the Patco strike, wouldn't have happened. We just show them the section. I got a bad habit of reading things, Ralph too. And so we went through all 330 pages of the bill, and as we looked at it, we just go to our colleagues and say, have you read this? And so whether it's defense hawks, or whether it's appropriators and budget hawks, or whether it's general aviators, or whatever it is, we've just gone to these different folks that have interest, and we say, have you read this? And they look at it and go, well, that ain't right. That shouldn't be in there. And I said, well, it is. And they're like, well, I need to really take another look. And before you know it, yeah, this bill was supposed to sail first week of July. It was supposed to pass, and it's still. We don't need this bill to crash land on the United States of America. We need to stop it, and we're doing our darndest to make sure that happens, and we protect not only our skies, but we protect the American people and their right to be able to have access to their own airspace.
As both of you are aware, the airlines have thrown literally millions of dollars into lobbying on this. They claim that this monopolization of air traffic control would make the planes run on time. Are they right?
Well, they're not looking at the data. Most of the issues with the aircraft delays are due to acts of God. I mean, it's the weather, or in many cases, it's induced by the airlines themselves. When you go back and look at the statistics, it's not a factor of air traffic control. They're handling all kinds of things in the air every day.
How many times have everyone that's listening here been in an aircraft and waiting at a gate for another aircraft to back out of there or be pushed back? This is the airline's own fault if there's delays. And again, if modernization will help that problem, we're for that. But privatization has no dog in that particular fight. It's not going to do anything but, in my opinion, would make it worse.
Well, and to that point, the other thing that we see is that, there's this kind of narrative going out there that there's been no efforts for modernization at all with air traffic control, or that they're using these slips of paper or whatever. One thing I learned as a soldier, ground truth's closest to the ground. So very early on in this issue, a year or two ago, I just went out and visited control towers. I went out and went to a contract tower, I went out to a regular tower, went out to military towers. I went and looked and talked, and I got all kinds of information. And one of the things that we find is that they're really, really efficient. And the other thing that I discovered in my little journey of going and asking questions is that most of the airline handling major towers that are out in across the country are already equipped with ADS-B, which is ready for the next gen system to take place on 2020. They're waiting for the cockpits to modernize so they can flip the switch.
They're waiting for the airlines to get their cockpits up to speed so they can talk to ADS-B out facilities.
So you're saying the FAA is much farther along in modernization than the airlines?
In fact, I can...
Yes, the FAA is further along in modernization than the airlines when it comes to ADS-B in and out.
I got on an airplane yesterday, and it was funny because on the side of this Embraer that was bringing me from Oklahoma City to Charlotte, it was touting the fact that it was next-gen equipped under the pilot's window. So I pulled out my camera
He sent me a photo
and took
of
a picture of it. And I said, yeah, they're not doing anything to, to make sure that we're modernizing here. And the fact was, it was touting that it was already equipped and ready for this new system. And look, I can take you right now into a room in Oklahoma City, and they can dial in any major tower in the country, and they can show you not only every flight that's coming in, it will show you tail number, it will show you a digital layout of the whole airport, and it will show it in the pattern coming in, and you can watch any airport across the country. You can do that today. And so this notion that the FAA is somehow not complying, or they're too slow, or that procurement is bad and because of congressional funding. Well, again, I go back to my comment. If lack of congressional funding or procurement was a condemnation of an agency or a system, then we ought to just tell the military to lay down their arms and quit, because we mess that up routinely in Congress when we do our scheduling and procurement and all of that. The truth of the matter is, our men and women that control our skies do a marvelous job. I mean, we've not even had a major airline incident of fatalities since 2009. And that was not an air traffic control issue.
That was a pilot error.
And so, gosh, and handling the continent of Europe plus Canada plus all of these other countries' airspace on any given day, if you combined all of their flights, it wouldn't even equal.
Congressman Russell has a photo of just flights in the United States compared to the flights in Canada. The flights in America look like a Verizon map. It is the outline of the United States on any particular spot in time, moment in time. Canada is dark.
It's dark. It looks like a map, but comparing North Korea and South Korea's electric grid. I mean, there's just no comparison. In fact, I'll see if I can get you both of these pictures that I've spoken to, and you can use them.
It's impressive.
Yeah, look. This is something that we've seen an amazing coalition. You've got those that are concerned about national security. You've got astronauts in unison coming out on this. You've got
Captain Sully.
Who knows about safety in airlines? Captain Sully has been very vocal on this. And in addition to that, you've got all of those out there that enjoy our airspace and our system that will be jeopardized. Do you really want a Cessna 140 charged as it takes off and lands equal to a 737, or at a rate schedule that would even differentiate it? Why do we want to do that? It will fundamentally change general aviation in the country, and if we don't think that's true, go see if Herman is flying in Germany in general aviation. Next 9, I can tell you the answer to that. You go to the United Kingdom, you go to France, you go to different places. The people do not have free access to their skies. It's very restrictive. Here, if you abide by the FARs, the federal aviation rules, and you do the things that you're required to do, you can go put up in the sky anytime you want to.
It's a freedom that we're very close to giving up, and we cannot afford to do that.
You've laid out a pretty compelling argument as to why this is not a good idea, but yet we have people who are pushing so hard for privatization. So what's the underlying motivation, in your opinion?
Well, certainly if I were an owner of an airline, I would want this bill for my board of directors, for my profit margin at the bottom, because if I can go to user fees and not fuel tax, then that's a win every day for my airlines. So economically, I can't blame the airlines for wanting this bill. It's a business model that would make that particular airline much more money. But again, that's their business and they are protecting that. Hopefully what we're doing is protecting the general aviation, the military, and the American taxpayer.
Another reason you might have proponents for this is just conservative ideals. We want to shrink government. We want to make things more efficient. We want to have reduction in government workforce and these types of things. Okay, so you got 2 people in a control tower. You can't go to one. Okay, on an 8-hour shift, you've got to relieve yourself. You've got to eat. You've got to keep your electrolytes up so you can pay attention. How are you going to do that? Can y'all just hold the pattern here for about 20 minutes? I'll be back. So we can't go there. The other thing, when it comes to people that think we're going to have a saving on federal employees and all of that, this bill accommodates and migrates all of the retirement system that we were supposed to be saving on. It migrates over it, and the government still has to match it and pay for it.
Only the new hires are exempt from that. All the old hires that would come into the system, the taxpayer has to foot that bill.
And again, I think the propensity, like I said, bees to honey, no, but this is dogs to antifreeze. It smells good, it tastes good, it appeals to our sensibilities, but it has consequences. And one of the reasons we can even make more advocates, but we've decided, to make enough advocates to block this, and we've been pretty successful at that. But the more people we sit down and get their attention on, and we show the bill, just this week we've added 2 more hard no's.
I added one today too, simply because they didn't know the CBO score. This was a bill that was brought to the notice of the leadership, right before July 4th.
Yeah, we were
whipped to see how we would vote when we came back from the July 4th break, and they were going to vote on it
that week.
That's how quickly they wanted to get this bill onto the floor for a vote. Luckily, with Congressman Russell's leadership, we put the brakes on. We started educating the people that needed to read the bill, needed to know what was in the bill, and to their credit, when they found that, said, "Whoa, this is something we need to step back and look at."
I think people's motivations are pure. I don't think anybody's out there going, "Oh, we want to wreck the national airspace. We want to, make our country less secure. We want to take away the power of the president. We want to kill general aviation." They don't want to do any of that. They think that this would be a more efficient system. And there are privatization reforms that we can see. I mean, there's some things that you might want to contract when it comes. But think of our biggest faux pas in those 3 categories that I've talked about: national defense, national intelligence, national aerospace. Okay, think national defense. Our biggest black eyes have come through contractors, and that was with oversight. Think Abu Ghraib. Think Blackwater, think things like that. With national intelligence, think Edward Snowden. So our biggest black eyes have come through contract, and this was with oversight. So do we really think that, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it, when we have a flawless safety track record from the system that we currently possess? Okay, let's modernize it. Put it on scheduled procurement. Do the things that we need to do to continue to make it a priority, like we do with our Department of Defense. That's how we modernize and solve it. We don't do it by making us completely at risk in what we're doing today.
Would you be in favor of a multi-year authorization for FAA?
Well, there's a couple of tricky points with that. Now, one of the sticking points on authorizations that we get into is that we say that we can't obligate funds for a future Congress. So the 115th Congress, for example, cannot make a bill that forces the 116th Congress to spend money. We say that, but yet we do it all the time. Now, one of the ways you do it is under scheduled procurement and review. For example, let's say we need new aircraft carriers. Well, that's not an overnight thing, right? So that's going to span a couple of sessions of Congress, maybe even 3. And so what they would do to fund that is that they schedule, so much in this Congress, reauthorized in the next Congress, subject to their approval, reauthorized later, and that's where you get into that. Since they've started with some of that scheduled procurement with NextGen, it's been on track in the last several years because they've done it that way. And so the FAA will tell you NextGen is on track, and it is.
What should your constituents, our pilots, be doing now?
Keep up doing what you're doing now. Also go to the town halls. When we come home, if we're at an event, whether it's a public event or maybe it's a smaller event, or we're going to be out in the public, and you have an opinion on this, get out and talk to us and say, hey, we cannot do this. I had a member of Congress today sit down with me with a whole sheaf of things that she got from her home state. And she said, oh, okay, I'm convinced now, not only from what you guys have given me in the past, but now I'm hearing it from people I know back home. And that collectively, because she was undecided, and that collectively brought her, because she got educated on it. And what we're finding is that when people get educated on this, that they say, no, we can't do this.
And I'll add that AOPA has been a leader.
Fantastic.
Mark Baker and his staff has been wonderful because they have been out ahead of this. That's what we hopefully have done on our end, is continue to stay ahead of ours that would be for this bill. My comment would be to light up the phones of the representative. Emails are good, phone calls are the best. Letters don't work because unfortunately they have to be screened before we read them, and sometimes we don't see them for 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But phone calls are immediate, and it does get our attention when we get a number on a particular subject.
And then when you're back in the district too, constituents, I don't know any member of Congress that if you went to the district office and set up a meeting with your member of Congress that we would not take it.
I agree.
And so go and schedule a meeting. Say, you know, I just need 15 minutes with the congressman while he's here at home or she's here at home. And you can get that. And then you can lay it out. I had 2 constituents come in favor of the bill that scheduled time with me, and I said, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. They both left now as staunch opposers of the bill, because as I laid it out, I mean, they were coming in to convince me, but as I laid it out for them, they said, oh, that's absurd. We had no idea that was in. Well, we can't do that. It's like, hey, I'm all for privatization and modernization, but we can't do that. Okay. So whether you're for it or against it, I don't know any member of Congress, if you're back home, that you couldn't schedule a meeting with your member. And that's effective, because then you get face to face. Constituents can bring their own sets of experiences to the issues, and we need to hear that. So that is a good way that you can really make the case.
Final words?
Let's stop it.
Let's
Let's
stop
modernize, not privatize.
Exactly. When I went to Oshkosh this year, they were broadcasting every 3 to 4 minutes.
They were wonderful.
Yeah, they
All the groups.
they did a fantastic job. And basically what Congressman Russell said, they were saying modernize, not privatize. I would have said modernize, not monopolize.